Maximus wrests his life from the underworld.
Hey boy, what in the world are you doing here?
He was elated with his escape.
I wanted out.
I set out now in a box upon the sea.
This is called The Half-Life, and it's for a woman I don't actually know, but my mom is a hospice nurse, and it's one particular patient that I talked to for a while until she passed away. The half-life. We won't have destroyed anything unless we destroy the ruins too. So, when the nuclear holocaust happened yesterday, it was bad, of course, very bad for the world. But we have Bethany Home Hospice. For us, it was, as head nurse, I went bed to bed, giving the residents the message. Nuclear free for all, world's gone. Bethany Home, made of nuclear bunker materials, constructed in the 90s, when such things are on sale. In short, we had survived. And the residents were really roused. The news, the adrenaline, their lives for months might be extended. Clean drinking water wasn't a problem. We had the IV drips. Also, tuna, Jell-O, enough rice pudding to fill a therapeutic whirlpool. They got a knitting circle going. Tried their old hands at wool radiation suits. They knit like crazy. It was great to see their minds off their bodies. But if we were what was left, we would need to repopulate. The early onset female dementias had to immediately start shock treatments in case their minds could make it if they became pregnant. There were very few men. There were always very few men. But there were some male cases with sperm potential. Of course, us staffers were mostly past childbearing age, but Bettina, the night nurse's aide, and Renaud, the night security guy, had been on a few breakfast dates. Our acutest hope. They were given the freshest cans of tuna. Elvira on the third floor, 90 and no help. Elvira said we could extract her healthy teeth for dental work if ever the new baby needed. Really, it was how it should. All the dying ones feeling as if they were merely everyone putting in bids to have their deathbed be used for Bettina's labor. But then Bettina and Renaud had their baby, and it was stillborn. And every single person who still had arms in Bethany Home took turns holding the. We will try again, I said. But Bettina and Renaud, as we were passing around, they'd left to build a house of straw in the radioactive wilderness. It was Helen's turn to hold the. Helen had ALS and I had to help. I was crouching down, the infant half in my arms and half in Helen's. Helen said, "How beautifully easy to break." I said, firmly, "Helen, it is already broken." But she had been me. Then Philomena, the blind diabetic, rubbed my cheek and said it too. "So easy to break." That, I said, is reality. That's nature. The seasons, I said, firmly. There are 4 of them. It is spring. It was spring by the calendar. At least, I'm not young. Autumn, if anything. But yes, I've embroidered on my uniform peas blossoms. "Please," they said. Philomena was fingering the threads of my peas blossoms. "Please," they said, "you could so easily break." It is my job to make my patients comfortable. Very well. I slipped a thermometer from my breast pocket, broke it, sipped its liquid mercury, a second thermometer, third, fourth. I filled a clean bedpan with beads of liquid mercury and ate bibelot after bibelot, but I continued to exist among them. Oil spill, baby. Here is our cold kettle, and here is our baby with a ribbon of crude round its rattle. We cannot keep the windows closed even in winter, lest he, rebreathing his own volatile organic compound breath, cancers himself. We are cold with the windows open, but of course we cannot light the oven. His cries are muddy. Murk pours from his ducts. Hazardous how always crying he is. He is always crying, and the oily drops are staining his penguin sweater, but we need the money, and I must to my job at the fire station now. Now I must leave him. Now I must leave him too, says his father, the fire salesman, in the darkness flickering. His fingertips are flint, and steel are his palms, but his lips are lips. We kissed, the crickets twitched. They are slower since the spill. There was their slow twitch song. There was the fire salesman, flickering. Now he is lifting his hand. He is making for the baby a charcoal sketch on the wall in farewell, for a fire salesman can never touch an oil-spilled child's. And here now is our tender-skinned being sobbing particulate matter. You cannot tell a child he has no right to cry. Stop it! You're leaking petroleum. He cannot cry. Don't cry. I wish you could cry, but my hands are tied. Very tightly. My hands are a strapped bundle of kindling. For that reason, and for that my fingers are made of scratch branches, I have never been able to hold him. When the baby is happy, his eyes fume. That is dangerous too, my little human firewood, my child who reeks of truck stop. There is another worlds, and another, somewheres we have never traveled. One of the somewheres, a tundra, so cold and dark that we, the baby fire salesman and me, might all shiver together there without making a spark. But here, there is only here, our little hazmat house, with the baby crawling back and forth. It is a small house. The oil spill baby looks like a boat rocking on the sea. The sea. Now the baby gurgles polycyclic hydrocarbons. We are here by the door. The baby stares at us, we at him. We stare in a plain, calm way. Our eyes, across each other's surfaces, skim. Usually, we're not allowed to look at each other. Even stares as far away as stars might burn. But what is the difference between burn and bleach? I ask because for a minute we are all white. Then one of us blinks. The camera's flash has gone off. For 1 minute we were all very bright. We were lovers of light. Now that is a picture I would put in a frame. Now that is a picture I would save in the blaze. My last one is really still a work in progress, but even in the car. But I thank you for letting me read here, and thank you for being such a nice audience. Thank you, Kate. I look forward to your reading. Who goes there? This chrysalis is pure hypnosis. There's nothing in the kitchen so bewitching. I want to get in. But you are inside. There is only one moth to be in the pantry. You. It is me. Who is thinking this? If it is I, then how did I get outside? So far outside, I have left the room. I am aflutter beyond the screen. Is this where the moth feels? Now I am even farther. I no longer recall the kitchen. There is just a sculpture of a moth and an inscription on its plinth. Nothing in the world was diaphanous as this. Now I am so far away that I cannot say that I am far. I am nowhere to be far from. But my mind is in the kitchen. If all the dead moth minds stayed to fly about the room, the air would be very thick, just little pockets, just recesses in the moth decease where someone could really breathe. But I would give up breathing for seeing. You are seeing. You are inside right now. The only thing to do is see out. I cannot. And now I'm outside again. How? I cannot explain to myself. I am severely constrained by the moth tongue. Wasn't I the chrysalis at the start? I was. I felt the moth shaking its wings in me. I did. But then I was very busy. I mean, the writer me. I mean, we had moths in the pantry. I was spraying vinegar on the counters. No, don't go back to that. Stay the chrysalis. Try harder. I have to clean the kitchen. I have to kill the moths. I've seen you kill the moths. You squeeze them into a tissue. I am watching myself kill moths until I'm spraying the vinegar into my own eyes. They sting. Now you can go back to that squeezing moment. Squeeze your eyes shut. How much? With as much violence as it takes to kill a moth. I like this. I like when everything is boiled down into a kind of jelly. A clear jelly. Moths have died to get inside this jelly. No, they are not dead inside the jelly. They are green and vivified. No, they all got trapped inside. They died. The place you are too fluttery to live in is jelly. Seeing inside the chrysalis is jelly. Jelly is liberty and greenery, yallery. I can be... No, you can't. You must be alone, and you can't. Thank you.
The newer book, After Image, is one book. It tells one story of a sort. And I wanted to read a section, again with this, just the feeling of the spirit of place. So there's a section just after the middle that uses Boston in that manner. So at the very center of the book, I should explain, the book is written in part because my father was a war refugee, World War II, born to a Jewish family in Poland and escaped across the Soviet Union to Japan and then to the US, and where I was born in New York. And this is a story that he doesn't ever tell, although it's a story that I know somehow. And so the book came out of a question to myself of how did I come to know a story that I'd never been told. So at the center of the book, the exact center of the book is this short paragraph, and then the Boston part follows. So I'll start with that short paragraph, which is this. Do we only tell each other's stories? Ask others to tell our own? Can we tell our own? Or is that what stories are for? To tell someone else's and allow another to tell yours? I find bits of stories everywhere in Boston, and these are plaques. D.L. Moody, Christian evangelist, friend of man, founder of the Northfield Schools, was converted to God in a shoe store on this site, April 21, 1855. That's down on State Street. The great artist and past national president who performed one of his well-known escapes from this bridge on May 1st, 1908, Society of American Magicians, Boston Assembly Number 9. I guess there were at least 8 other assemblies of American magicians in Boston alone. This escalator is dedicated to the memory of Councilor Hyman Pill, friend of the subway rider and all mankind. That's in Central Square, Cambridge. And the plaques of memory, those I saw in Paris as a child, to the martyrs of the resistance fallen on this spot, nearly always with flowers fresh or recently faded. The bullet holes in the walls fascinated me then. In Paris now, I take note of a different set of markers. And this is in French, but I will translate it for you. Well, I'll just read it in English. 165 Jewish children from this school, deported to Germany during the Second World War, were exterminated in the Nazi camps. N'oubliez pas, which is don't forget or never forget. This in the Marais at the beautiful stone school building behind the Marché des Blancs-Manteaux. Inscribed over one of the 2 entrances, it says, École primaire, Commune de jeunes garçons israélites, mode mutuel, fonds municipal, juin, and it has a date. Primary school for the Jewish children. Over the other door, the stones are effaced. Asile, école, prim, al de jeunes israélites. I look up asile, refuge, cognate asylum, or is it a fragment? Who memorializes the survivors? They have to die before they can be remembered. And when they die, the ones who remember them, but not the events they survived, will write their stories, if they ever told them to anyone. A plaque is for the dead. An effaced inscription is for the living, or the living are an effaced inscription. In Boston, it's as if we live in a utopian novel about the future, its vocabulary rooted and limited by the past's projection. The 1930s steel towers of Post Office Square, the Italianate parapets of State Street, the granite office blocks named for once prominent families, each an old idea of what should be here now. The present and the future may be as entangled here as in Japanese. I sang this once about Walden Pond, and this is a quote from a song. We went walking in circles today, at the edge of water, of now and never. We're never in time. But it could have been equally about Logan Airport, flat earth with low hills beyond, the setting sun exactly as in the Luminists' paintings, the use of the land exactly as Henry Adams might have predicted. Long walk through neighborhoods not meant for walking, overpass to train tracks, CSX loading facility, car repair shops, and the domestic life hard by, sagging wooden balconies on the backs of brick buildings, Boston International Gourmet with signs otherwise in Russian, Alston Tropical Market with a few Brazilian products on largely empty shelves, imported soap, Easter candy, magazines, an enema kit, plantains, meat, packaged bread. A girl makes silly faces at her mother through the curtains of a ground floor window. I think of something my mother told me only recently, how in New York during the war, my father's parents' friends would bring to the house all their bills, official forms, and documents for my father to translate, fill out, make calls about, or otherwise fix. He was still a boy, but the only one who had learned enough English. He resented it, she said. Was it the responsibility he disliked? The tie to the émigrés, the constant reminder of their troubles, or perhaps the use of his skills for their ends. A wag has placed a plaque to Quentin Compson's suicide on the bridge back to Cambridge. Quentin Compson, drowned in the odor of honeysuckle, 1891-1910. Lyric, only a moment amid a life of failure. Life of success would be epic. So that was the section I wanted to read from there. It makes use of quotations from my own work, which is kind of an odd thing to have done so early in one's career. Maybe it's odd at any age, I don't know. But so there are songs in it, and there are actually also quotations from my first book, which is kind of was an odd gesture, but there you go. So what I thought I'd read now is some new work I've been writing, which is prose again, and but maybe even less poetry than before. I started a blog because I'm a musician with my partner Naomi, and our manager said we should have a blog. So I started a blog, and it's for music. It's called International Sad Hits, and it has music I enjoy on it from places we've traveled to or have otherwise found out about music that most people outside their own culture don't learn about. Because it's amazing, you go places and big stars or important underground figures to a music scene in another country that doesn't speak English never make it out of that country. It doesn't matter how influential they've been on this entire nation's musical tradition, but if they don't sing in English in this day and age, it doesn't travel very far. And so we've discovered a lot of amazing music that wasn't so hard to find once you were somewhere and just asking who are the best Italian singers or who are the best Japanese singer-songwriters who play acoustic guitar or so there's a remarkable amount of music that we found that's like this, but doesn't come in English. Anyway, so I used the blog to post things like that, and then I started just writing things, and I decided to just start posting it on there. So I've been doing that, and in this section, the two sort of combine. So I will use a prop as well. So what I'm writing is a a kind of a novel. It's called Self-Storage because it's a play, the book on Kafka's Castle. And you know, we have these self-storage facilities everywhere in the landscape. And somehow I felt they're like our castle. I don't know, it's just like these spaces that you don't get to go in unless you really belong there. So the main character works in one of these, and his name is Kay. So I'll read you a section, it's not the very beginning, where Kay is in this self-storage facility. It was with particular surprise, bordering on alarm, that Kay felt his office door open from the outside one otherwise unremarkable morning. His back was to the entrance, and he doubted the sensation so much that he did not turn around at first, thinking it a phantom feeling or even a memory. A small presence soon made itself known, however. Its first sound was not speech so much as a coo. Kay turned, expecting to find a bird that had somehow trapped itself in the room. His eyes met instead a girl's, perhaps a woman's, small and frail as a child, but with a clenched jaw and taut frame that indicated years spent resisting some force, like wind on a ship's deck. Her eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" she asked, leaving Kay with a distinct sensation of being himself the force she was now facing head-on. Her hair was pulled back as taut as her body. Her hands were on her hips. She was squared against him in a manner that made it clear, above all, that he could not possibly knock her down. He wondered if she might be an expert in some martial art. "I am Kay, the caretaker of this self-storage facility," said Kay. Although it had been so long since he had spoken words aloud, he couldn't be sure they were intelligible. Language in the head is different than on the tongue, he thought, and made a mental note to practice speaking aloud more to keep his vocal cords active. The woman looked at him without saying anything further. Could it be that he had spoken in a different language than he intended? Not too long ago, he had opened a unit with Berlitz instruction tapes, and he had been playing them indiscriminately on a dictaphone he had found in a unit of office supplies. He didn't care what language they were teaching. It was their cadence that pleased him, the repetition of phrases, the slow development of complex sentences out of tiny units, like a magnet attracting bits of metal and somehow turning itself into a machine. He had spoken aloud so little lately and listened so much. Could he have inadvertently adopted one of the languages from those tapes, even as his internal grammar remained unchanged? "Well, Kay, I'm glad to have found you," said the woman finally, in a language he continued to understand. But found was so odd. No one could be looking for him, surely, that he held on to the remote possibility that she too had switched languages, matching whichever one he had absorbed from the tapes. It seemed plausible that there could be a language where found was a synonym for met, maybe more than one. "I am glad to have found you because this building, although large, is so oddly shaped that it is difficult to perceive from the outside. There is a type of camouflage that utilizes an unexpected change of scale. An airplane the size of a fly would be an obvious example, but it can be equally effective in the reverse, a fly the size of an airplane. If such an insect were in the sky, do you think you would notice it?" Kay was having trouble focusing on the meaning of her words because he was finding it difficult, in fact, to continually perceive her form. Her stance, her manner when she spoke belonged to a much larger person. Was she camouflaged in just the way she was describing? Her shape seemed to dissolve in and out of the background. Kay felt dizzy and steadied himself with one hand on the back of a chair. "I am positive that you would not notice a giant bug in the sky," said the woman definitively. It was clear that she was right. Kay felt her drawing closer, although he was now nearly on the verge of blacking out. "What is your name?" he managed to stammer. "Joy," she said, "but that is too obvious, symbolically speaking, so I go by Frida." When Kay came to, there was music playing, a song he could not identify, but which felt nonetheless familiar. A phrase here and there he could anticipate, some of the melody as well. And yet when the middle eight modulated unexpectedly, Kay knew for certain he had never before heard the tune. Throughout the days, our true love ways will bring us joy to share with those who really care. But Frida means peace. Joy is Freude, he said to Frida, who was lying beside him. She looked at him with pity. The song ended, and another immediately began. Almost. Almost immediately began. You wouldn't think you'd have to do this with a phone, but you do sometimes. This one he knew for sure. It was unchained melody. But where was this music coming from? Frida stood up abruptly, drawing herself as tall and taut as he had first seen her in the doorway. It was like watching a sail hoisted on a mast. Kay, meanwhile, resembled more a heap of rope left on a dock. Had he been asleep? Had he experienced love? He wasn't sure of these last moments, or how many there had been. The Righteous Brothers were singing, and time goes by so slowly, in a way that made it self-evident. When the drums entered big for the final verse, Frida turned to the door. She pointed to a speaker mounted on a wall before she left. It was painted the same color as the rest of the office, and Kay had never noticed it. "I'm leaving the music on," she said. "There's a dial under your desk." Kay got up and reached for the dial, which he had also never noticed. He tried it gingerly and found it changed the volume in the speaker. He turned it all the way in one direction, and it clicked off. Frida was gone, so Kay had no one to ask why there was no other dial. If this was a radio, wouldn't there be a tuner as well? Or where else this music could be coming from? As for why he hadn't noticed it before, Frida had already made it clear. He had. There's no missing a bug the size of an airplane, but including it in one's view was another matter. Kay looked around at the familiar office, straining to see more objects hidden from him in plain sight. He examined the volume knob under the desk and found it attached to a wire which snaked down a table leg to the floor, then ran like a rodent across the floor to the nearest wall, along that wall to the corner of the room, up the corner to the ceiling, and out the top. Dust fell in Kay's eye as he poked gingerly at the hole in the ceiling, and he scrambled off the chair he was standing on. When he was able to open his eyes, he thought he could hear music again. This time it wasn't emanating from the speaker that Frida had pointed out. It was coming from the tiny hole in the ceiling. Kay stood once more on the chair and stretched his ear toward the hole despite the dust. He could just faintly hear strings swelling in what seemed like a patriotic tune. He jumped down. This was such an unusually athletic gesture for Kay, it gave him a rush of adrenaline. Went straight to his desk and turned the volume knob. Strings swelled out of the speaker on the wall. Now that he could hear more clearly, he realized it wasn't a patriotic tune. It was the can-can, played as if it were an anthem. This time Kay left the volume on and fell back heavily in his chair. He sat there in a kind of stupor, listening as the music continued, from the nationalistic can-can to a crooner smoothly singing, "Don't look so sad. I know it's over. But life goes on, and this old world will keep on turning. Let's just be glad we had some time to spend together. There's no need to watch the bridges that we're burning." Kay waited for these opening lines to repeat, but the singer instead stretched like a cat and meandered off, repeating an anodyne chorus endlessly, humming it, handing it off to strings, taking it back, changing keys, even whispering over it at one point with reassuring but meaningless words, anything except returning to that distressing first image. Had Kay heard the words correctly? Were these banal lovers, in fact, saboteurs, holding hands on some lofty perch as they watched the destruction they had wrought below? A voice interrupted the singer, bringing this puzzling plot to an end, if not conclusion. "This is the memory station," it said, with the mellifluous calm of a radio DJ. and another song began. I'll stop there. Thanks.